The New York State Department of Transportation presents the DOT POD.
And welcome into the DOT POD. I'm Josh Heller.
And I'm Anya Cardos.
And we are delighted to have you joining us.
In today's episode, we're exploring a critical part of emergency preparedness for the New York State Department of Transportation, and that would be our yearly staging area drills.
Now, these drills, they're not just routine exercises. They're basically huge dress rehearsals for real-life events. And these can range from hurricanes and floods to snowstorms to any other emergencies that may present themselves. Now, recently, Anya and I had the chance to observe a staging drill out in Utica and learn firsthand how they're a crucial learning opportunity, especially when every minute counts.
So to help us better understand the details of what goes on during these drills and their significance to DOT, we're excited to welcome Mike Palowski, Regional Director of Operations in the State Department of Transportation's Region 2, which includes the Utica area, along with Anthony Roach, Senior Transportation Analyst, also from Region 2. Welcome, guys.
Hey, thanks for coming, guys.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Let's get things started by learning a little bit more about you guys. Why don't you tell us, your role here, how long you've been here?
So, as you said, I'm the Regional Director of Operations in the Mohawk Valley Region 2 area. I've been doing this job for about 10 years and been at DOT for almost 32 years now. So, I've been in operations for pretty much my whole career, about the past 25 years or so. Been very involved with some emergency management activities, both in Region 9, when I had a stint working as a resident engineer there, as well as in Region 2, and also providing some assistance on some statewide emergency management situations that have come up over the years.
Wow, I would imagine you've got a wealth of institutional knowledge.
Well, I wish I didn't when it comes to emergency management, because every time we're out there responding to an emergency, costs the state of New York money. Quite often there's damage to not only state property, but some private property as well. But we always do the best we can to make sure we can get things up and put back to order as quickly as we practically can, and then to make sure that we're ready for the next event that's certainly going to come at some point.
Anthony, you were also at this drill that Josh and I went to that we observed recently.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your role here at DOT and how you were connected to the drill.
So in my daily duties, I manage the Transportation Management Center, the Mohawk Valley Transportation Management Center, and I work in the TSMO unit. I work with the traffic signals group and the rest of the traffic safety mobility office, and we manage our state highway systems. We have project coordination, and we communicate with the construction and operations groups on a daily basis. So I coordinate portable variable message signs, and we deploy those all over the region for our construction zones.
Those are like the signs that say, construction ahead, or,
yes,
like alerts, basically.
Yeah, they should say messages that the static signs don't say.
Yeah.
But yes, they're for motorist information. I also coordinate the automated work zone speed enforcement vehicles in the region, and we don't have many facilities that can that are adequate to have those vehicles, but we do schedule them whenever possible.
It's funny you mentioned your daily roles, because I think one of the things that was interesting about this drill, and we'll get more into it, is that, what you were tasked to do, and we'll get more into it as I mentioned, but it doesn't necessarily equate to exactly what you do in your daily role for anybody who's part of this, emergency group. And I think it's very interesting that you're kind of outside your comfort zone a little bit, and you're forced into situations that you don't deal with on a daily basis, which again makes these drills even more important. So talk about what you were tasked to do as far as the drill is concerned, and like I said, we'll chat about the specifics of the drill, but what were you doing there? What was your responsibility there?
So as a situation unit leader, along with Jacob Olds, we manage the RISDA 2 assessment teams.
Can you tell us what is RISDA 2?
RISDA 2, roadside damage assessment, or road status and damage assessment. And those teams are deployed. They're kind of geared up and deployed sometimes right at the outset of an event, a weather event, and we have to be ready. Sometimes on standby, and that'll come from the incident commander or regional emergency manager. And when we're stood up, we can have sometimes up upwards of five damage assessment teams, which is typically 2 people per car and then a coordinator on the inside. And we will assess the system and provide like documentation of each damage site that we come across.
So let's get into these drills in and of themselves. Both of you guys were involved in the staging area drill that Josh and I went to. We saw a lot going on there when we first arrived. There were like at least a couple hundred attendees. There was some equipment rolling in, including a boat that was arriving. Can you explain what these drills entail and who participates in them?
So with this drill in particular, we had about 180 individuals, 9 separate agencies that participated. Some city officials, we had some emergency management officials from the county as well. So we had a pretty good turnout for it. And essentially, whenever there is an emergency that requires multi-agency response, and if it's big enough, that usually is what happens. You need to bring in resources, not only equipment that you saw, but also some staffing, some contract work, even you need to get involved at times with the Red Cross or some other public service organization such as that. So part of these staging drills is making sure that we have all those contacts and that we actually sit down and go through just a drill. Pretending that it was an actual situation where we're going to have to bring all these resources together. And it gives you a chance on a calm day to sit down and have some conversations about what you would do during the course of an emergency. Make sure that the names and telephone numbers that you previously had are still appropriate. So it gives us an ability to practice for when that next emergency event occurs.
Now, how often do you have these types of drills? Obviously they're not all in Region 2, but how often do these drills get staged?
So New York State DOT participates in one staging area drill every year. Each region hosts it separately. And what you saw in the Mohawk Valley, Region 2, Mohawk Valley, is pretty typical of what occurs. The actual event that you're getting ready for, that changes. Some of the participating agencies change, depend on what type of event that you're preparing for. But what you saw was pretty typical of what happens. And again, it really gives us an ability to make sure that we have those contacts, put names with faces, because when 2 o'clock in the morning, when you're in a stressful situation, if you've just met an individual for the first time, it's more difficult to have that trust and that confidence in an individual. Rather than having a situation where you were able to work with them in the past.
Yeah, Josh and I were talking about this, where with everything, if you need to do something when seconds count, it needs to be muscle memory. And that was what we kind of got out of what we were observing there. It was kind of like reiterating, basically, probably 50% of the people in the audience know what we're talking about. We're going to assume that maybe 50% don't. And so it was kind of like reiterating for people who did, but then new knowledge for those that didn't. But you want to make sure that this is as real life as possible. So you set up a very realistic scenario. What was the scenario that we observed? What was that specifically? And how did you pull all of that together? Because it was very detailed with like weather forecasts and everything. Talk about that.
So for this particular event, working with Amber Stevens, who's the coordinator for the Emergency Management Office here at State DOT, we had some discussions early on when we volunteered to host this drill about what would be a realistic situation that we would respond to. In the Mohawk Valley area, we've gone through some high hazard ranking functions in the past. And typically, if we're going to get hit with an emergency type event, it's going to be flooding. Next up would be a severe ice, snow type event. We also get into some drought experiences, and we're even looking at the possibility of some forest fires, how we would go through and respond to some forest fires. But realizing that flooding certainly has occurred relatively recently in the past in the Mohawk Valley area, and that's still one of our most potential hazards that we're going to have to respond to. That was what we elected to select for this particular drill. So the drill in particular was a flooding event in the Oneida County, region-wide, but specifically in the Oneida County area, the village of Whitestown. The village of Whitesboro in Whitestown, Sequoia Creek. There's traditionally been some severe flooding there in the past. It impacts not only state system, but local system, residents. So it gave us the ability to partner with some of those other agencies who would be out there with us if we were responding to an actual flooding event.
So I guess vibing off of that, what specifically do you need to do during these events then? Like, you need to know, where are people staying in the event of an emergency? What about lodging? What about food? What about all the equipment? What are the punch list of things that people are learning during these?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll bring up specifically the situations unit.
Sure.
And the roadside damage assessment, and then maybe you could talk about that rabbit hole and what we did to get ready for that.
Absolutely.
So, yes, you're exactly right. No matter what the emergency situation that you're getting ready for, it still requires us to implement our incident command system. We opened up a regional operation center. And I know everyone here at DOT is familiar with those terms because we've taken the mandatory 100 and 700 training that is a requirement from everybody, because when there is a large-scale emergency, it's all hands on deck, and it doesn't matter what your day job is. You may be tapped on to provide some assistance so we can get that transportation system up and running as quickly as we practically can. And part of the staging area drill, that kind of a little bit of misnomer. The staging area is extremely important, but all that support that goes into that, and that is fleshing out actually who is going to perform those incident command system roles, who's actually going to staff your regional operations center, making sure that you have individuals in positions that are properly trained, and making sure that you have enough individuals that if it's a long scale event that you can have somebody else step in and fulfill somebody else's roles. One thing that we did as part of this drill in particular was to make sure that we had an appropriate number of individuals who could provide roadside damage assessment. Anthony Roach in the situations unit is part of our incident command structure. He has the lead on those RISDA teams, roadside damage assessment, and we ensured that we had sufficient planning and sufficient training for those folks, and actually implemented them as part of this drill, right, Anthony?
Yeah, we have to, like I mentioned earlier, we have to deploy sometimes quickly, and it could be in region or out of region. So we have to we maintain a list of qualified and trained individuals who can go out and be safe while surveying the damage that has just occurred on the system. And so how we train them is, and we go through a RISDA drill every year, beyond the staging drill, just in the region. And so we will send teams out to locations. And for this drill, it was the intended locations that an event may flood. So it's hard for them to take pictures of something that's not actually flooded. But they'll go out and take pictures, take descriptions, and just document everything that a site, the site conditions that may occur in the field. And what this does is it allows the region during an event to have an idea of what's going on the system. Like we have our operations folks who are out there closing roads and cleaning up everything that they do. But then the roadside damage assessment teams are documenting it. And that documentation is so important because there's federal reimbursement that comes for, like after an event. And that's if an event is declared an emergency and whatnot. But our damage assessment teams really provide much of the documentation that is necessary to get reimbursement.
How, I'm thinking of a specific situation. I'm thinking of not that long ago in Rome with the tornadoes when they came through. So a real world situation that I'm sure you were involved in.
Yes.
How are you able to do that job while also keeping yourselves safe, but knowing that there are roads that aren't open, there are power lines that are down, trying to document everything that's going on when it is
like chaotic?
It is chaos.
So that's really the beauty of the ICS and its command system. So whenever we're responding to an event, and there are resources that are outside of what we typically control, whether it be people, whether it be equipment that comes in, we actually just change our organizational structure from our traditional day-to-day reporting that we have in the regions to this incident command structure where we have different individuals who are performing different roles, so that when we bring in those resources, we have a good way to ensure that those resources are tracked, make sure that we have a good idea on what the situation is occurring, as you mentioned, with some of the road closures out there, using those roadside damage assessment teams to make sure that we're collecting that information, and then most importantly, sharing it with everybody who is involved with that emergency response as well. And I would encourage everybody to take a look at their regional emergency management site, the statewide ETO site, to actually see who is performing those ICS roles in your region. And I also encourage everybody that if it sounds like something you might be interested in, to talk to your local emergency manager, your local DOT emergency manager, and volunteer and say that you'd like to be involved and get some additional training so you could participate in some of these activities as well.
So you're saying just anyone living in these communities that we can be involved in some of these?
No, that was just for DOT. Now,
this is just for DOT.
But that is a good point. If you are interested in helping out in your local community,
Okay.
we have countless numbers of volunteer firefighters, emergency management individuals who help out. Not only do we work in these communities, we live in them as well. So after work, a lot of people are coaching Little League and then answering their page to respond to a fire. What I found over the years are those same individuals are usually the ones who are helping out internally here at DOT when we implement some of these ICS situations.
You know, Josh was talking about the chaotic nature of real world situations. You made sure to throw in some monkey wrenches during this drill. Can you talk about that? Like, what specifically did you do that was a surprise for everyone involved in this rehearsal for the real thing?
Yeah, I won't get into the water main break at the facility because the RISDA team actually wouldn't have assessed that in the moment in a real scenario. Maybe afterwards we very well may have. But
so there was one of those though.
There was
water main break.
Yes, and that would have been chaotic for an event.
Yeah.
But we had another one come in where there was a natural gas concern, and National Grid was trying to get to an area to secure this line, repair it, but there was debris in the way, and so debris hauling and the movement of debris during an event is such a huge part of the reimbursement process. Tracking debris is incredibly difficult. It's just debris, but we have to know how much of it we're moving and placing in haul piles and whatnot. So the RISDA team, what we were just tasked with in that scenario, we have to go out and assess the damage. But first we had to, for this drill, we were thinking about all the other things that we may have to, encounter, such as, hey, wait, if there's a natural gas main break, should we send this team out yet? Should we even be out there during this type of emergency at this location? And we would have requested a little bit of assistance from higher up the incident command structure in terms of that decision making, and we pointed that out during our exercise.
Well, and I think that's probably the point, right? To find where deficiencies might be.
Right.
Mike, we were talking, and I was asking how this was last week. I was asking, how the drill was going. You're like, it's going smooth, and I was like, that's great. But you don't always want it to go smooth. I mean, that's the point. It's to find out where the rough patches are so that, when it actually is an emergency, it's not a problem. Did you, encounter many or any issues that can be resolved, so that when an emergency ultimately does occur, it won't be problematic? Did this point out any things, to you and your teams that need to be looked at?
Yeah, that's a good point. So obviously we practice these to make sure that we're better for the next time a situation arises. And that's actually built into these staging area drills. So we had, I believe it was 5 evaluators who actually were at the staging drill, observing, taking notes, and they're actually going to put a report together with what we did well and what we need to improve upon. What I personally witnessed going through this drill is, we certainly do have some areas where we can improve upon. It seems like all of these emergency management situations, it boils down to communication, making sure that you're sharing accurate information and timely. Using the IT technology that we have out there is a little bit of a struggle, because if you're using a particular program or an application that you usually don't use, and a year later it's a stressful situation.
Right.
And hey, don't forget to use your particular app, and you're having trouble loading it, or you're having trouble connecting to the system. So those are a couple of the issues that we identified that we're going to work through. Make sure that we upgrade some of the equipment that we had some issues with, and then we're also looking forward to getting that evaluation report back to see if there are some other areas that we need to go and improve upon.
Like a forensic report, basically,
Yeah,
of what happened,
Yep.
what was good, and maybe what needs to be improved upon. Well, I think about this a lot. There is no I in team, and it takes teamwork to successfully pull off any kind of response. What is the interagency communication, as you would say, Mike, but also like working with them on drills like this? What were the other agencies that were involved in, and how does this kind of help moving forward when you're facing, like Josh and I were talking about, like, we have hurricanes in the state, we have tornadoes, we have blizzards. So
Yep.
how do you work with them?
So I do have to say, DOT, I'm really, really proud of the efforts we have at DOT, particularly with our emergency management. We have some very well-trained individuals. We have good policies and procedures in place. A lot of times when we work with the locals, they haven't been through emergencies very often. They've had a big turnover with personnel, and they're just not used to working with us in these environments. So part of this drill is bringing them in, letting them observe how we go through and do this, particularly with our incident command, the various section chiefs in the role that they play. I had a few individuals who are part of those municipalities have some discussions with me about actually setting up some ICS functions in their local shops as well. So that was great to hear. But the procedures we have in place when we implement our incident command, we open those regional operations centers, the ROCs. We actually invite individuals from those participating agencies to come in to that ROC during some actual events. And it's great just to have that face-to-face conversation, to be able to share some information, to be able to vet out sometimes some conflicting information that comes in, and to be able to share some of those resources, because there may be a situation where you want to respond to it, but we just don't have enough boots on the ground. But you can look over at the trooper and ask to get a situational awareness by having one of their field troopers report back to us. So our policies and procedures that we have in place have been pretty well vetted and work out pretty well.
When we were at the event, there were obviously those who were taking part in the drill itself, Anthony, like you, but there were way more people who were not, who were just there to witness it, but they're then going to be able to take that information and bring it back. Talk about how that information is kind of, maybe you weren't directly in it, but you're learning and you're able to pass this along to others on your team. It seems like this is, not just for the limited amount of people who are taking part physically in this drill, but for those who were there to witness it, being able to just to see how this situation would play out.
I think it's that muscle memory too that you mentioned, just people seeing what an incident command structure looks like and how it stands up during emergency response. I think viewing that for the first time is an experience in and of itself. So if it's during a drill, that's a low risk situation. That's just a learning environment, really.
We got a lot of new people coming into DOT. How long have you been with the department?
I've been with the department for about 7 years now.
Okay. All right. Have you noticed that these kind of efforts are really paying off when it comes to folks who are newer to the department and don't have quite like the 30 years of experience that Mike does and other folks? Yeah,
for sure. And there's not just, there's plenty of room on the Region 2 RISDA team. We would like to see more volunteers in our region. We've got a list of 30 something, and we could always use more, but I'm sure every region could use a lot of people to volunteer during emergencies. But other roles like GIS, geographical information systems like mapping, to the finance and admin side of emergency response and logistics and operations, and even just procuring the lunch that day was an effort. And you have to do that during an event to keep your people happy.
Right.
So
you got to feed them and give them water, and
Yeah.
make sure they got a place to sleep.
Absolutely.
Again,
Right.
they are volunteers. They don't
Yeah.
need much, but they need the basics. And
Right.
and those are things that I don't think you think about. People are coming in from across the state. They need a place to go, and especially for something like this, for a flooding event, there are people who are displaced from their homes at the same time. So
Already.
maybe finding a place to put these volunteers in is going to be even more complicated. And I think kind of digging below the surface, like, okay, yeah, we need to clear the roads, we need to take care of this, but there's so much more that goes into it, from a logistics side of things that I think people just don't think about because they don't need to.
Yes, and the actual staging drill, to me, that was a little anticlimactic. It was great. That's when everybody gets together. You get to see all the equipment there. But in Region 2, working with the statewide emergency manager with Amber Stevens, we had about 6 months of planning, getting ready for this. And receiving the equipment, actually getting together at the staging area. Behind the scenes, we had a lot of training that occurred in the region to get ready for this drill. We had all of the section chiefs, who are essentially you can think of those as the senior managers of this organizational structure. We hosted a in-region training for everybody who was going to be a section chief, as well as training for Anthony mentions our roadside damage assessment teams. We also have a resource tracking application computer program that we had training for individuals in the region, as well as having training for what happens after these events, and that's the reimbursement, making sure you have the paperwork to keep track of all the damage that responded to, so we can get some funding for some of the cleanup costs that we had. A lot of the ICS paperwork that's associated with it is extremely detailed, takes a lot of time to put together. So those section chiefs and their teams did a great job over the past 6 months getting all of that information ready for us.
And again, if you are listening and are interested in volunteering and being a part of this, talk to your emergency management team. Find out, how you can volunteer and how you can help. Certainly, we all need the help, and it sounds like it's pretty rewarding thing to be a part of. Pretty cool team to be a part of.
When we have time, we like to ask our guests, as we wrap up this episode, where they like to go when they're road tripping. Anthony, Mike, what are your favorite road trips? Name one.
Well, my family and I just got back yesterday from a trip to Algonquin, Maine.
Oh,
and
really nice.
It's the south of Maine, and it's just really, really beautiful little town. And there's several more up along the coast that we got to visit during our stay, and it's quite a nice little village.
Oh yeah. And what are your favorite road tripping tunes? What do you like to jam out to?
Yeah, I was mentioning to Mike before we got here. We listened to Fleetwood Mac and Doobie Brothers and
Nice.
all the sort.
No
Yeah.
argument here.
Yeah.
No argument here.
Mike.
So I'm more of a New York State guy. Being from around the Utica area, I'd like to head north for most of my recreation. So I'd say really anywhere up in the Adirondacks. If you get any of the roads up through there, just beautiful places to visit, great communities. As far as what you usually put on the radio, well, I'm usually with my wife, so whatever she wants to put on. And
That's also a good answer. That's also a
Good
fair
move.
answer.
yeah.
Well, we want to thank both of you guys for coming in and telling us a little bit more about the drill itself, but also about all the work that goes on behind the scenes, and again for volunteering to take part in these types of things, to helping out in these emergency type of events, and hopefully bringing more attention to that. We'll bring more people out to that. So thanks both of you guys for coming down.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for letting us share our story. Thanks for bringing us down.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
And thanks to all of you for tuning in to this episode of the DOT POD. Certainly glad to have you, however you are tuning in. Again, if you are interested in volunteering and being a part of this, talk to your emergency management team. Find out how you can be a part of this as well. So again, thanks to our guests and thanks to all of you for tuning in to the DOT POD. Certainly glad to have you. Want to reach out, podcast at dot.ny.gov. That's the easiest way to do it. It's podcast at dot.ny.gov. So she's Anya, I'm Josh. We'll be right back here on the DOT POD.